Shalom Aleichem, welcome everyone to the Yibane Beit Midrash. Today we have a very special presentation, an introduction to, I won't say, I will let the Rabbi Asher Baruch Wegbreit introduce himself and explain what this is all about, but let me tell you who he is. He's an old friend. We go way back, and he was and had held the position of the Mashgiach Ruchani at Yeshiva Birchas Torah in the Old City, as well as the educational director there. He was also a Magid Shir for over 20 years in Gemara, Mishnayos, and you know what he's an expert in? Teaching the Ramchal's learning methodology. He was also, he supervised Musar Vadim in areas of character development, tefillah, and tshuva, and that's my segue to introduce several of his books. He's a well-known author, and this happens to be just the one of the 4 books. And if you want to tune in, this is not my promotion. This is a really promotion for the, I can't say, not yet. But I also give a chabora in the Shari Tshuva, Rabbeinu Yonah's Shari Tshuva, and he wrote a book. And I'm going to read it, and I'm going to use it, because I know it's full of golden opportunities for tshuva. And he has also written, I'll mention the other 3 books real quick, and that is The Power of Ashrei, which we say 3 times a day or more, and Aleinu, which we say 3 times a day or more, as well as the Vilna Gaon's Megillas Esther. He translated it and added his own commentary. So without any further ado, I'm going to introduce you to the Rabbi Asher Baruch Wegbreit.
Thank you, Rabbi Poston. With a little vision and your help, I'm hoping that this series is not going to be just a bunch of classes. I'm hoping we're going to be able to spark a flame in Klal Yisrael. Let me explain. There's one mitzvah that if you upgrade this mitzvah, it has at least 3 amazing results. Okay, number 1, and this is big, you'll become a more sincere person. Who wouldn't want that? Okay. Number 2, you will become excited about the mitzvahs you do. And thirdly, definitely last but not least, you'll get closer to Hashem in a very real sense. Okay? I think that sounds attractive, correct? So the question is, what's this mitzvah? And the answer is to have Kavanah for mitzvahs. To have intention while and before you perform a mitzvah. Kavanah the mitzvahs. Okay? Now, beside these amazing things, sincerity, closeness to Hashem, turned on about the mitzvahs, how about this, that it's the halacha, it's halacha l'maisa, okay? If you look at the Shulchan Aruch and the Mishnah Berurah in Siman Samach Aleph, right? The Shulchan Aruch and the Mishnah Berurah conclude, mitzvahs tzrichas kavanah. All commandments require kavanah. Now, it's interesting, you should know, it was a debate in the Gemara. They had a debate, do mitzvahs require kavanah before you do them? You know, I'm doing the mitzvah of learning Torah or whatever. So they concluded, the halacha concluded yes. But you should know, the other side, right, that says mitzvahs don't need kavanah, not exactly. What it means is that if you did the mitzvah without kavanah, it counts b'di'evet. So it's far from desirable, and even that position says for sure you should have intention when you do mitzvahs. Okay, so that's what is it's important halachically, and it can I promise you it can transform you. Okay, so what the rabbi kindly I would like to call Rabbi Poston a first mover in this. He heard about 15 minutes of some classes I've given on this, and he said, let's go for this. Okay. Well, what I'm trying to do is create a grassroots awareness movement about the incredible importance of this mitzvah, okay? So I'm very excited that you're joining me, and my wife came up with a great name for this, okay? KLM. Have you heard of that? Kavanah the mitzvahs, okay? There's no problem with the airline. I checked with the lawyers. Okay, we'll make it. It's going to be very. I hope you will soar into the heavens, but not on a plane. Okay. So KLM, welcome to KLM. We're starting a series, and you can get in very early on this. Okay. So I mentioned to Aaron about an acquaintance I had. I have to tell you a story that was over 30 years ago, well over 30 years ago. I was in Los Angeles, or it's a place called Claremont. I was working on my PhD in psychology, okay? And in the dormitories, I opened the door, and there's this man from China. Now, I was about 25, he was 35, and his name was Ling. He was from Beijing, okay? Now, why am I telling you about him? Because he had an experience that changed his life, and I had a similar one. Listen to what happened to him. He was Rahmanis for him. He grew up in the times of Mao Zedong. Did I say that okay? Mao Zedong. And the Cultural Revolution, which was, if you study about it, was a nightmare. It was an absolute nightmare. They would send young children, young people to coal mines, and that's what he did. He was in the coal mines at the age of 13. Not exactly a bar mitzvah, okay? So he was in the coal mines, and what happened? He found a book that changed his life. It was translated into Chinese, Rousseau's Social Contract. It's a book about the philosophy of democracy. The book changed his life. Why? Because at that point he says, I know what I want to do with my life. I want to try to bring democracy to China. So found that book, that's what happened. Now, you're probably curious what happened. So when I met him, what happened, he got out of the coal mines by coaching the women's basketball team. Then he went to foreign ministry school, and he worked his ways up the government till he became assistant to Deng Xiaoping's daughter. Pretty high for mid-30s, okay? But he realized it's not going to happen from the inside. We're not going to change, we're not bringing China democracy from the inside. So he came to California, and he enrolled in a PhD program in political philosophy, and he was busy there, very inspiring roommate. So that he changed my life just seeing his example. But he read a book, it changed his life. About 5 years ago, I found a book, I read it, and it changed my life. Now let me qualify that. My life, thank God, was wonderful. It was amazing. I was, as the rabbi said, I was learning Gemara, I was teaching Gemara, and I loved Gemara. I was learning Musar. I was teaching Musar, and I loved Musar too. It was great. And also, thank God I wrote some books. Everything was going great, but try as I may, I was tossing brachas out of my mouth. I wasn't happy. You nod your head in acknowledgement, of course. I wasn't happy about that. And also, there's a mitzvah, Shnai Mikra Echad Torah, to learn the Parsha every week. I was doing it like a robot. I was a dutiful robot. So something was missing with my connection to mitzvahs. And that's when, thank God, and I wasn't in a coal mine, thank God I found this sefer. I am happy, Rabbi promoted my book, I'm happy to promote this. It's a sefer called Kasher Tziva Hashem, as Hashem commands, right? And it's all about the mitzvah of Kavanah. Mitzvahs of Rabbi Daniel Garfinkel. I recommend the book highly. He's very happy I'm giving these classes. In fact, I taught it in the yeshiva for about a year or two, and so many copies were sold that he came to pay his respects and give me a visit. So anyhow, that book changed everything. By this improving this mitzvah of having Kavanah mitzvahs. However, before we go there, let's start with mitzvahs themselves, okay? I think we need to reorient our understanding and experience of mitzvahs. Going back to Ling. So I came to Israel. I learned for, like a half a year there, and it was transformative, okay? And I come back, and Ling sees me. Now, Ling was trying to move up the ranks in politics. So he trained himself to look into people's eyes and just in a second figure out if they're dangerous. Or that, the student riots happened, and he was like doing covert operations in our dorm room with the army. That was unbelievable. So I'm trying to tell you, Ling could read people, right? And he knew me very well. Come back, Ling looks at me and says, he's like staring at me almost, after a day or two. He looks at me and goes, we have Chinese saying, you can change river and mountain, but you cannot change person and personality. but you've changed. He was, I don't get it, you've changed. What happened? Right? So I'd like to try to explain that, okay? What happened? So let's talk about brachas, right? We make brachas, right? Make bracha on water, make brachas, morning brachas, etc. Let's talk about a bracha. The Rashba and the Malbim explain that bracha, there's different opinions, okay? You have the Nefesh Chaim, but the Rashba and the Malbim say bracha, Baruch atah Hashem, means Hashem, you are the source of something that I really like and appreciate. For example, fruit, being able to see, clothes, I could go on, right? You're saying, Hashem, you're the source, and I really appreciate it, okay? Now, what else do we make a bracha on? Let's say your tefillin, right? Mitzvahs, right? So what are you saying? Baruch atah Hashem, you are the source. Asher kiddeshanu b'mitzvosav. Thank you, Shem, for sanctifying me. Do you realize, we don't realize, we're thanking Hashem for sanctifying us because something profound happens when you do a mitzvah. It's transformative. And also, by the way, the Nefesh HaHaim says, just give you a little feeling. See, what I want to do before we talk about the mitzvah of intentionality, let's talk about mitzvahs. Let's realize what mitzvahs are and what they do to us, okay? So, the Nefesh HaHaim says, when you do a mitzvah, there's this spiritual light of Gan Eden that descends upon you. Sounds good? And I was making a joke, but again, we get sanctified when we do a mitzvah. The Yetzer wants us to not realize what that means and what's going on. I made a joke. There's a doctor I'm a good friend with, Dr. Setzer, and I said, imagine, somebody comes into his office and he says, Doctor, I don't know what's going on with me. I just became religious recently, and I don't know what's happening, but he says, are you okay? He says, actually, I feel pretty good, but it's just I feel strange. He says, well, let's take an X-ray. Take an X-ray. He says, you've been sanctified. He sees him glowing, as if, you hear? It's a big thing when you do a mitzvah. Something very deep and spiritual happens. So I'd like to suggest that's what he saw, okay? However, that was, what was happening at that time? I was fresh and new. So I was not doing the mitzvahs mechanically. I was not doing them by rote, you hear? I didn't have 20 years of making blessings behind me. So I was on fire, and therefore the fire of the Kedusha, of the spirituality, was right on me, okay? However, what if we've been in the game for a while, right? What do we do then, okay? That's why I'm here. That's what I want to tackle. That's what KLM is all about. We want to fire up, okay? We want to fire up. So number one, the first thing that these classes, I'm going to hopefully give many, these classes are meant to, do you know what you're doing when you're doing a mitzvah? We don't have awareness, and that's because the Yetzer is not interested at all. I'm sure he is very upset about this class, to tell you the truth. He is not interested in you having awareness of the profound effects when you do mitzvah. So number one, that's what the classes will be about, okay? Number two, how about this? Here's something else. So we have to reorient towards mitzvahs. How about this? We also have to reorient towards Hashem. Okay? That's another agenda here. Here's something that's, I'm afraid you're probably going to relate. Okay? And that is that for many, Rabbi Miller makes this point. He says, for many people, where does Hashem exist? Well, he's in the Siddur. He's mentioned in the Siddur and in the Chumash. That's where Hashem is. No, maybe he's here also. Maybe he's in our lives. We tend to only experience Hashem. Oh, Hashem's somebody I mention when I'm praying. Hashem's something I mention when I'm learning. That's not ideal, right? And we need to work on that, okay? I'm just trying to decide if I should tell you this right now. 1 second. Give me 1 second. Okay. Let's make the problem worse. You're learning Torah. And let's say you know how to learn Torah, and you enjoy learning Torah, and you're learning Torah. And when you learn Torah, you get, unbelievably close to God, but you might go through the whole time of your learning and not even think of God or be aware He's there. Very, very scary. Now let me explain something very important, especially when you learn Gemara, any type of Torah you need to sink your teeth into. The Nefesh Chaim says that, look, build yourself up beforehand, but if you're going to do a proper job learning Gemara and learning Torah, you have to focus on that. So I'm not coming to say that you should be, where's Hashem? Is Hashem here while you're doing it? But it is a kind of scary. You can spend a whole day in yeshiva learning Torah and not have thought about Hashem. Very, very. Now, this is such an issue, by the way, that Rabbi Miller, that's how Rabbi Victor, he wrote a book. See, there's another thing. Here, one more, okay? Shabbos, okay? You have a beautiful Shabbos, right? You have it. You're connecting with the people there. It's singing, beautiful singing. There's Divrei Torah, right? And if you were to count the guests, right? So we have 6, right? So if you count the guests, would you count Hashem? He's also present. And Shabbos is all about encountering the presence of Hashem. But we could pass through a Shabbos in a beautiful way and still not be aware of Hashem. And don't feel bad. That's not my aim. My aim is to let you realize that the Yetzer Hara wants us unaware because he knows how incredible it is if we make that connection. Okay? So we're going to lay down. It's very dangerous when you're reckoning with the Yetzer Hara. We're going to lay our heads low, but we're going to try to work on this. Okay? So we're going to first work on connection to mitzvahs. Secondly, Hashem. Being aware of his presence. Okay? Right now, the hottest thing, maybe you'll tell me I'm not so in on everything, but mindfulness is huge, correct? I think mindfulness is a huge movement. I have a proof, okay? I had a mentor, a management professor at top business school, right? And I couldn't believe what he told me. I just reconnected with him a month or two ago. He goes, we're working on mindfulness in management. I couldn't believe it. They're training managers to be mindful, And by the way, it makes a ton of sense. It really makes sense to learn to not just get triggered and go in another place. And it's almost like they're learning Musar and developing their character traits from it. It's incredible, right? So mindfulness is a big thing, right? However, this is what's beautiful. We're also lucky to be in Torah and everything, where the world finishes off. We just begin, okay? Their goal is to be present in the moment. Our goal is to be present in the presence of Hashem. You hear? That's what we want to work on. And it's not just about the world to come, okay? But that brings me to another thing we need to work on, okay? This is just an overview. Don't get overwhelmed by the overview. But before we even get to the mitzvah of KLM, Kavanah mitzvahs, we have to appreciate what mitzvahs are. We have to connect to Hashem, and we also have to think about Olam Haba, the world to come. Okay? Is it important? Is it important to think about it? Well, if you ask the author of the most famous Musar Sefer in recent times, Mesilas Yesharim, he opens up, he says, your obligation in the world is to recognize and convince yourself of how important it is to aim for connecting to God in the world to come. Okay? Big! He calls it a foundation. So again, interestingly enough, but not so surprising because of our good old enemy, right? It's all right. Not so surprising. Who thinks about Olam Haba? Religious people. Rabbi Miller is making this comment. He's observing. He says, religious people. Shabbos is main Olam Haba. Olam Haba. Who thinks about it, right? So that's another thing that I want to focus on in these classes, is I want us to connect to that. It's a foundation. How good is a building without a foundation? So if it's important, and by the way, we're going to go step by step, but all of this can be very reviving. Okay, good. We're finally ready to start talking about Kavanah the mitzvahs. Okay, we talked about mitzvahs. We talked about Hashem, and we talked about the world to come. Now the Kavanahs. So, let me tell you, this rabbi, in his introduction, he said, interestingly enough, again, I've been learning many years, and halacha, and all these things, but there's certain things you just pass by. He asked people, do you have Kavanah when you do mitzvahs? When I say Kavanah, I don't mean like in prayer where you're really focused in on what you're doing and conscious. That's great. But I'm talking about before you do a mitzvah, do you have in mind, I'm doing the mitzvah of chesed by giving Rabbi Wegbreit a glass of water, right? So do you have in mind the mitzvah? So he asked people, do you have in mind, do you have Kavanah? So they said, sure, for Megillas Esther, okay, and Kriyas Megillah, and the blowing the shofar. Why? Because the Gabbai goes, okay, everyone, be sure to have in mind that Baal Tukea is going to go to you your obligation, and the Baal Koreh with the Kriya, right? So people do because they're told to. So then he did further interview. He said, anybody else? Do you have Kavanah past that? So some people, God bless, Birkas Hamazon, benching. Very important to do that. And Kriya Shema, okay? So those are all very important, and so he thought to himself, maybe it's not that big a deal. He considered it because that's mostly what people were doing. But he did intense research in the halachas and found that, lo and behold, you're supposed to have kavanah for all your mitzvahs you do, everything. You hear? So it's a big topic. And it's amazing. But what's so beautiful about it, by the way, does Hashem love us? I think so. How many mitzvahs did he give the non-Jews? 7. How many did he give us? 613. Was he trying to overwhelm us? Wouldn't I be more, Rafi, this is your kind of question. Wouldn't I be more successful? Give me 7, let me do them well. Why is he giving us 613? Okay? The Maharal explains, Hashem wants to create a link and a connection with you in every possible manner. It's for our benefit. Also, it's great to be connecting in every possible dimension. Okay, so that's the thing it's all mitzvahs. Even mitzvahs rabbanin, and we can talk about los ases, etc. There's a world there, but I just want to tell you, it's for real now. So let's practice what I'm preaching, okay? Now, the people in this room, and I want the people who are watching this video, let's have kavanah for what we're doing right now. What are we doing right now? We're learning Torah, okay? Now, the truth is, you may say to me, well, I covered that with my Birkas Torah, right? My blessing on the Torah. The Rabbi Garfinkel understands from the Bir Halacha that's still not ideal, okay? That we infer that, okay, you had some kavanah. But ideally, every time you learn Torah, before you start the session, I have in mind the mitzvah learning Torah. So ready? I came up with a little acronym. HIM. H-I-M. HIM. Have in mind the mitzvah of learning Torah. Okay? I assure you, you may not feel anything right this moment, but you just up the game incredibly. Incredibly. Another mitzvah to have in mind, okay? Have in mind the mitzvah to have kavanah for mitzvahs. Okay? Now, where is that? Where's the source that you should have kavanah for mitzvahs? Okay? Rhetorical for right now. In the second paragraph of the Kriya Shema. Okay? It says, if you listen carefully to my commandments and you love Hashem, u'lavdo b'chol levavachem, and you serve Him with all your heart. Ezuhu avoda shebelev. I know what you're going to say. Tefillah, prayer. And you're right. There's a Bryce in Tinus. What's the service of your heart? Prayer. But says the Chai Adam that not just prayer, kavanah for your mitzvahs. That's service of your heart. I told you, if you'll work on this with me, you will become more sincere. Your heart will be in what you're doing, and that's service of the heart, says the Chai Adam. Okay. Don't want to scare you, but he says if you don't have kavanah, you've knocked out that mitzvah, Hashem Yerachim. So we're going to focus on the positive, but it's a big thing, serving Hashem with your heart. Rabbi Miller explains, what is the heart? He insists it means the mind, serving Hashem with your mind, okay? However, he even goes so far, he wrote a commentary on duties of the heart, right? Hos halevavos. He translated duties of the mind. How come we all associate the heart with feelings? The answer is because when you're thinking proper thoughts and Torah thoughts, it should be with your heart. You should feel them too, okay? But it's your mind, right? So serving Hashem with all your mind and heart, all your heart. So that's the source for God. So right now, okay, yeah, you know what? I know you may not believe me. I just told you right now. You just added the kavanah of learning Torah and the kavanah to have kavanah for mitzvahs, right? What happened when you did this? Okay, so there's another book, super duper life changer, called Eved HaMelech. Has anyone heard of that? It's by Rav Shmuel Haminer. He was a Yerushalmi in the early 1900s. He wrote a book called Alas HaShachar and Tefillah. Anyhow, this rabbi reveals all the mitzvahs in every parsha, and it's incredible. It's just incredible, all the things you do. So Rav Hamner brought this, and okay, get ready for this. Right now, we're learning Torah, right? And we're learning Torah now in an ideal way because we had Kavanah. And we're doing the mitzvah commands. Says the Zohar, when a person does a mitzvah down here, the mitzvah appears in the highest realms. Now listen to this. It appears in the highest realms and crowns itself and says before Hashem, Yehuda made me, Aaron made me, Isaac made me, etc. You hear? It says, I came from Asher Baruch made me. That's happening right now. Do you hear this? Right now. But in a very ideal way. The crown's going to look beautiful because you had Kavanah. Okay? So, that's, so we just started, okay? Now, I'm going to share with you, we're close to the end of this introduction. What I want you to know is the different areas that this applies of having kavanah. That we're going to break down the mitzvahs into like 3 groups, okay? So first of all, there's mitzvah. This is mitzvahs you're doing all the time, like learning Torah, right? Or if you smile at your wife, right? Or your friend. If you're warm and you say hello, you could be doing hesed because you're making them happy, or you've been giving them kavod, right? So we're going to train ourselves to have Him in mind. Have in mind when I'm learning Torah. Have in mind when I'm nice to my friend or my wife, etc. So the first part is just to start training, because it's not automatic, obviously, right? I'm just introducing this to maybe you tonight and the levels of it. So just be patient with yourself, but realize if you remember just once, think about what's going on. There's a crown with your name on it, okay? So the first part is we're going to start becoming, like gaining consciousness and intervening in our daily activities, in our learning and everything, and putting in I have in mind the mitzvah of learning Torah, okay? That's part number 1. Part number 2, Hashem gave me this morning, I think, because of this idea. Let's say you found a kettle, and it looks, here in Yerushalayim, right? Let's say you find an old kettle, but let's not make it like from the Second Temple, okay? But let's say you find a kettle, and it's in decent condition. It's years old, right? So what are you going to do to see its value? You're going to take it to be appraised, right? So I know somebody who is having a hard time marrying off his first child, him and his wife. So they got an autographed painting from a fairly famous photographer or artist, and they had it appraised, and they said, you'll be fine with the wedding. It was like thousands and thousands of dollars, right? So here's what I want to tell you. There are a lot of things you're doing, and if you had them appraised, you would find that there's many mitzvahs within your single mitzvah. Let me give you an example, okay? If, God forbid, we hear that somebody needs prayer, right? Someone's sick, right? So we say Tehillim, correct? So what mitzvah did we do? Okay, we did the mitzvah of reciting Tehillim for a sick person. Ready? But let me appraise this a little further. Do you know there's a mitzvah, says the Rambam in Hilchos Tainus, right? There's a mitzvah to cry out when people are suffering, when Jewish people are having a hard time and suffering. There's a mitzvah deraisa. Your prayer turns into a Torah commandment. We think of tefillah as rabbinic, right? Rambam says once a day it's deraisa, but okay. So ready? You say a Tehillim, him, Have in mind the mitzvah to cry out when a Jew is in trouble. The Shar Chole Israel. You're including in all these people, Rahmanas, who need our prayers. But that's not the only thing. If you praise that mitzvah a little further, you will see that you're doing the mitzvah of halachta v'drachav, of walking God's ways. When you share the pain of a fellow Jew, you're doing a mitzvah deraisa of emulating a Kadosh Baruch Hu. Him, have in mind, emulating a Kadosh Baruch Hu, mitzvah halachta v'drachav. You hear this? So we're going to, in this series, we're going to expand these mitzvahs. We're going to get them assessed and appraised and see how much is going on in them. Okay? The third one is really amazing. People have heard of the concept alchemy, what alchemy is. Now, this I Googled this, it was a medieval thing, this and that. So you probably heard what it is. You take like base metals, and it was some way they would try to turn the base metals into gold and silver and things like this, right? So I think it was a mishigas. I mean, if anyone knows otherwise, tell me. I don't think it was real. But spiritually speaking, it's real, okay? I'll give you an example on the way to this class, okay? So I live in Har Nof. It's about an hour bus ride, so I timed the bus line and this net to get there. I run up to the bus right in time, and I forgot my Rav-Kav, okay? What can I do? And it's too late. So I said, I brought money just in case, so I got a cab. And at first I'm not happy about it. And I said, wait a minute! You know what you can do now? You can do the mitzvah paying a worker on time. Now, if you've taken a cab, right, you pay him at the end, correct? So, mitzvah srichas kavanah. The Hafetz Chaim brings this in Avos Hesed. If you have in mind, I'm doing the mitzvah too, not to delay a worker's pay and to pay a worker on the day, right? So, there's a crown up there saying he paid the worker on his time, right? He's getting sanctified. I was getting sanctified. I was like, this is great. And not only that, thank God I remembered there's another mitzvah. And you've probably heard this, but we don't think practically when it comes to these opportunities. Ready? The mitzvah of loving Hashem, ahavtas Hashem Elokecha b'chol meodecha, with all your resources, with all your money. So mostly, I'm in a company of very serious, sincere Torah people. You're spending money all the time. What are you doing it on, right? Your kids, your friends, to learn Torah, to make a livelihood so you can support a family. Everything you're doing is an expression of my resources are for you, Hashem, and because I love you, right? So I realized, this expensive cab ride, boom, loving Hashem with all my resources. And it was all my resources. No. So anyhow, you hear? You can be an alchemist. You take, ready? Anyone here is careful to hydrate and drink water? Great. Healthy food, anybody? Okay, all right. Okay, no, it was more the water. But anyhow, every effort you make for your health, says the Kitzer Shulchan Aruch, is nishmartim ma'od l'nafshosechem. Take good care of yourselves. In fact, they asked Reb Chaim Kanievsky, if you look both ways when you cross the street, yes, it's a mitzvah nishmartim ma'od l'nafshosechem. Why cross the street carefully and not get eternity? You hear this? Why drink? Why only hydrate and leave it down here as some tin and lead? Let's turn it into gold. You hear? So that's the third category. Okay? So what this series is going to cover is going to try to cover, again, we're going to try to appreciate what a mitzvah is and what it does to us. We're going to try to get closer to Hashem. We're going to try to think about Olam Haba, and then we're going to be set free, and we're going to start putting Him into the picture. You're doing it anyway. You're already doing it. Why not? Let's just bring it to the most beautiful and high place. Okay? I hope you'll join us on this journey.
Yibbane, yibbane, shall come.